Let's jump right into this explainer. Imagine waking up tomorrow and boom, your country's borders are just sliced right down the middle, literally pitting neighbors against each other. Well, today we are diving deep into the history and the dirt, the archaeology of the divided monarchy of Israel and Judah. We're going to look at the exact moment a unified powerhouse completely fractured and see how the texts and artifacts left behind tell the wild story of two distinct sibling nations desperately trying to survive in a highly volatile ancient world. Let's get into it.
So it all kicks off with what has to be the ultimate disastrous political meeting at Shechem. Solomon has passed away, right? And his son Rehoboam sits down with the tribal elders. Now, the elders simply ask for better treatment, maybe a few less taxes. But instead of listening to his older, wiser advisors, Rehoboam delivers this incredibly crude, aggressive threat. He basically promises to be a brutal tyrant, telling them his little finger is thicker than his father's waist. I mean, wow. Those harsh words completely broke the 12 tribes apart, forever. With just one terrible meeting, he threw away his unified kingdom. For this explainer, here's our roadmap. We'll cover a kingdom torn in two books and two theologies, Pharaoh Shishak's raid, building the northern kingdom, artifacts, idols, and art, and finally, battles and enduring mysteries. Let's keep moving. Section 1. A kingdom torn in two, Israel and Judah split. Following Rehoboam's massive blunder, the geopolitical map of the ancient Levant was violently, and I mean immediately, redrawn. The tribal elders notoriously said, "To your tents, O Israel." 10 whole tribes broke away, heading north with Jeroboam to form the new kingdom of Israel. Meanwhile, just 2 tribes in the south, Judah and Benjamin, stayed loyal to Rehoboam and the Davidic line, forming the kingdom of Judah. So what was once the strong, unified front under David and Solomon was suddenly 2 weakened, bickering sibling states, constantly fighting over their shared border. Section 2. 2 books, 2 theologies. Kings versus Chronicles. Now, before we actually dig into the dirt, we really need a biblical decoder ring to read our primary texts properly. You see, the same history was recorded with 2 totally different theological lenses. The Book of Kings, it operates on delayed retribution. Think of it as the sins of the grandfather falling on the grandson. It was written for a people in exile who had lost absolutely everything, and they were desperately asking, what happened to us? But on the flip side, the Book of Chronicles operates on immediate retribution. You sin, boom, you get judged right away. That one was written much later, post-exile, when the people had returned to the land. They were asking, okay, what do we do now, and when is our next Davidic king showing up? Understanding these lenses is absolutely crucial, because it completely alters how we judge the reigns of these ancient kings. Section 3. Pharaoh Shishak's devastating raid, the Egyptian invasion. Okay, so weakened by this big family split, the sibling kingdoms almost immediately became prey to the 22nd dynasty Libyan pharaoh Shishak. Shishak knew exactly how weak and divided Israel and Judah were. Tracing his route is fascinating. He sent his army across the Sinai to Gaza, then pushed right up into Jerusalem and the northern kingdom. But here's the kicker. A wing of his army was diverted south into the Negev desert. Why? Because the Negev was exactly where the highly lucrative caravan trade routes from Arabia met the Mediterranean. This wasn't just a random attack. It was a carefully orchestrated raid to plunder wealth and completely disrupt those valuable trade routes. And the best part is, we don't just have to take the ancient text's word for it. Etched literally right into the stone wall of the Karnak temple in Egypt is a massive topographical list. It shows about 180 cities and forts that Shishak overran. Each one is depicted as a bound captive with the name of the city in a little cartouche underneath. It's just a stunning piece of monumental propaganda, but it perfectly anchors this biblical event right into the archaeological record. Section 4. Building the Northern Kingdom, establishing Israel. Meanwhile, up north, the newly minted kingdom of Israel had to rapidly, and I mean rapidly, build an identity entirely separate from Jerusalem. But political power up there was incredibly turbulent. We're talking constant coups and assassinations. They started out at Shechem, which made sense. It had deep historical roots. Then the capital was moved over to Tirzah. And honestly, it wasn't until the 9th century BC, when King Omri bought the hill of Shemer, that they finally locked down a grand permanent capital at Samaria. But beyond just building cities, the first northern king, Jeroboam, had a huge PR problem on his hands. Think about it. How do you stop your citizens from traveling back south to Jerusalem for their religious festivals? Well, his brilliant, if highly controversial, strategy was to physically and spiritually block them. He built two rival sanctuaries. He put one way up north at Dan and one at Bethel, sitting right on the border of Judah. And just to top it all off, he erected golden bulls at these sites to directly rival the Ark of the Covenant down in Jerusalem. A bold move, for sure. Looking at the ruins of the Iron Age royal citadel today gives us a real glimpse into the former glory of Samaria. Now, it's heavily damaged by later Roman construction, specifically when it was turned into a retirement town for Roman centurions, which is pretty wild. But you can still see these beautiful header stretcher walls. They were built using this clever interlocking pattern of long and short stones, showing us exactly where the northern elites ruled. It was right here that they traded and built up a kingdom that, for a time, seriously rivaled its southern brother in both wealth and military might.
Section 5. Artifacts, Idols, and Art. Wealth and Worship. Now let's get into the dirt and see how the monumental art and even tiny idols reveal the stark cultural differences between the two kingdoms. It's actually amazing how archaeology confirms the extreme wealth of the elites, the exact same wealth that prophets like Amos harshly criticized. When archaeologists dig into these northern royal centers, they find unbelievable luxury. We're talking massive, ornate stone pillar tops, known as Proto-Aeolic capitals, crowning the palaces. There are window balustrades that literally still hold flakes of the red paint mentioned by the prophet Jeremiah. We find incredibly delicate, brilliantly colored pottery called Samaria ware. We've even found the exact extravagant ivory furniture inlays that Amos blasted the elites for lounging on while ignoring the poor. It's all right there in the ground.
And the art wasn't just decorative, it was heavily symbolic. Despite those strict religious commandments forbidding graven imagery, jaw-dropping royal seals were widely used by government officials. Just look at this roaring lion. This specific seal reads, belonging to Shema, servant of Jeroboam, likely Jeroboam II. It really shows us that at the absolute highest levels of government, the visual culture of the surrounding ancient Near East was being fully embraced. This perfectly highlights the distinct, yet blended, or syncretic, religious paths the everyday citizens were taking in the north versus the south. Up in northern Israel, the dirt reveals bronze bowls, Phoenician-influenced ivories, and heavy Canaanite overlap, which was undoubtedly pushed by figures like Jezebel. But down south, in Judah, archaeologists are constantly unearthing these mass-produced clay pillar figurines of women holding their breasts. They're found almost exclusively within the borders of Judah. It points to this widespread household fertility worship, perhaps of the goddess Asherah, mixed right in with their traditional worship. Section 6. Battles and Enduring Mysteries, the Fall of Israel.
Well, now we arrive at the tragic conclusion of our tale. The northern kingdom's instability eventually and inevitably caught up with it. In 722 BC, the mighty Assyrian Empire rolled in, laid siege to Samaria, and completely destroyed it. But here's the major takeaway I want you to remember. The famous 10 lost tribes weren't magically misplaced like car keys. The Assyrians simply deported the population up to northern Syria. Over a few generations, these people fully assimilated into Assyrian culture. They learned the language, they intermarried, and they simply lost their Israelite national identity. They were never lost geographically. They were just absorbed into the giant Assyrian machine. And speaking of the Assyrian machine, let's talk about the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser III. This thing is a masterpiece of ancient propaganda. It is the absolute first depiction we have of an Israelite king in a contemporary relief. It shows King Jehu of Israel literally bowing down and offering tribute to the Assyrian king. But what's kind of funny is that the Assyrian intelligence completely got it wrong. The inscription calls him the son of Omri, even though Jehu was the guy who violently overthrew the Omride dynasty. Even ancient empires had bad intel, I guess. So, while we have amazing confirmed artifacts like the Black Obelisk, I want to leave you with this incredible puzzle. Check this out. This is the Joash Stela. It's a stone block with beautiful Hebrew script detailing temple repairs by a Judean king. Sounds amazing, right? Well, the problem is it's completely unprovenanced. Nobody knows exactly where it was dug up. It splits modern scholars right down the middle. Literally, half swear the patina proves it's 100% genuine, and the other half are absolutely certain it's a brilliant modern forgery. It's the ultimate reminder that biblical archaeology isn't just dusty history. It is an active, highly debated, and absolutely thrilling detective story happening right now. So what do you think? Are we looking at the ancient words of a king or the absolute masterpiece of a modern criminal?